If you're thinking about moving anywhere from Sarasota, obviously where we live, Venice, down to Port Charlotte, Englewood areas, these are some weird things that I think you should consider that, from my experience living here for quite some time, should probably be on your radar. And the first is trees and landscaping. Now, this is a very nuanced thing, but I think it's important because it could very greatly affect risk and lifestyle. So the first thing I want to put on your radar is trees, because this is a pretty big one as far as risk and or benefits. So when I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about hurricanes mainly, and just some of the damage that could happen from it, but also just other damages not from hurricanes. So let me just start by saying I have a love-hate relationship with oak trees. Down in Florida specifically, I wouldn't be as worried about them up north, I would say, at least in my experience. I don't know though, I've never owned a property with an oak tree in the north, but in Florida, overall, I lean towards, if I can avoid them, I would rather not have them. And here's why. So when we first moved into our home with oak trees, we had one in the front, one in the back. Even to this day, there's older neighborhoods, maybe more in central Florida, I'd be a little less concerned, like in Orlando. Or like Ocala or something like that, but like closer to the coast where hurricanes are going to impact you more, I'm a little more hesitant on them, but even in central Florida a little bit too. I love the shade they provide. I love the way they make a neighborhood look. They're beautiful. They are, they add so much character and just, that mature landscaping that everyone wants. You know what I mean? They look great. They make a neighborhood look awesome. They make your house look awesome. It's good to get that shade when it's hot. Those are the pros. And those pros are undeniable. I love all that about them. Like, if it was just that, awesome. I would be like, yes, give me as many oak trees as I can get. Here's the thing in Florida though. There's like three things. The first, we get a lot of rain, a lot of sunshine throughout the year. Not as much in the winter months, but as a whole, it's just more constant and consistent than a lot of other areas in the United States. So because of that, not just oak trees, but like weeds for that matter, like you can have like shrubs and stuff, and like a weed can grow in it and become a bush of its own, growing in your bush, but it's a weed bush in like a week or two in the summer. And I'm not exaggerating, it's that fast. But oak trees are the same. So because of that, the first issue is the roots. The roots will spread very, very wide, and not a big deal at its face. But here's the issue. When we bought our home, we had roots going under the driveway, lifted some of the slabs. And we have in-ground sprinkler system. And well, guess what oak trees like? Water. So we've had them kind of push some of our sprinkler heads to the side, just one or two of them. And not a big deal, but it's just, some of those things are a little bit of a nuisance. And then you think about it a little bit further, and if they start getting too close to the house, now you start to have issues with it going maybe under your foundation. And here's the other thing. I'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk hurricanes in a little bit, and we'll come back to the roots. Second thing, the branches. They make beautiful canopies that can cover roads. If you've ever driven in Florida, like just about every city, you'll have like one or two roads where there's oaks on both sides, and they cover and they touch each other, and they basically make a canopy over the entire road, and it is magical. Just love driving on those roads. Again, I love how oak trees look. This is not me saying I hate oak trees because I just don't like the way they look. I love the way they look. They're gorgeous. But those branches, those canopies are not very hard to make. And again, it's because they keep growing and they tend to grow out. They grow up, but they also grow out. And so if you got one by your house, not just the leaves getting in the gutter and things like that, which is a little bit of a maintenance hassle and things like that, but also on top of that, a lot of those branches can tend to become brittle and or just get really full and thick and dense. And again, you're thinking okay, yeah, that's great, more shade, right? But guess what else? It creates sort of like a parachute. So let's talk the third thing. When a big storm or hurricane goes through, if any of those branches are brittle, they can break and bust through lanai screens, windows, things like that. Not saying it's going to happen that much or that common, but we've had it happen to us, bust through some of our lanai screen. But on top of that, if there's enough rain going through, what can happen is it can start to get the soil really, really soft. And now there's some wiggle room for those roots. And now at the top, if you got dense leaves and you got a parachute up there and the wind is pushing it, guess what we've seen happen? Not very often, but occasionally, Yep, the whole tree goes, roots and everything. And again, remember how I was talking about how those roots will spread? Like, I'll show you an example. Like this tree, if this was an oak, where I am standing right about here, it is not out of the question for the roots to reach this far. And so all that soil and everything could come right on up with it. By the way, if you're wondering where I'm walking, this is Lemon Bay Park and Environmental Center in Englewood, just on the north end of Englewood, just south of Venice. So people always ask where I'm walking in these videos. I'm gonna try to remember to start putting that in the videos. So that's my issue with oak trees. I would much prefer, oh, here's one other one. I'll give you one other one, and then I'll talk other shrubs and things like that, and then trees I would prefer. One other tree, magnolias. Those things, man, I'll tell you what, after Hurricane Ian in our neighborhood, some oaks, yeah, sure, you know, more just branches breaking off more often than not. So I don't want you to think like, oh, if you got an oak tree, the whole thing's gonna topple. No, it takes the right conditions to make that happen. Lots of saturation in the ground, lots of sustained wind, you know, for a really long period of time, and some huge gusts. So you're more dealing with branches breaking off as being the bigger issue, I would say, generally speaking, but still there's some other issues with the roots growing. But those magnolias in our neighborhood, I swear, like half of the magnolias in our neighborhood got knocked over. We hated ours, to be honest, just because it has these pine cone things that always drop, the leaves come off, and it's just a maintenance headache. As you can tell, I'm not a green thumb. I don't like spending a ton of time outside working on the yard stuff. Like, I don't mind being out there mowing the lawn and doing a few things, knickknacks here and there, but just all those extra things start to add up, especially like with our house. We got a lot of different shrubs and bushes around the house that I don't exactly know how to take care of and stuff. So like, again, nuance is gonna matter. Maybe you love that kind of stuff, and for you, like, oh, no big deal. But that being said, those magnolias do tip over like crazy. We saw so many of those tip over. So if you have the option to not get those, a magnolia or an oak, I would lean towards not having it. We still got our oak in the back, and I'm not as concerned about it as long as I'm keeping the tree branches trimmed up top. It's far enough away from the house. It hasn't been affecting any sprinkler heads at this point, and it's nice for the shade. So again, I'm not like anti-oaks, but I wouldn't want it too close to the house. But magnolias, like, yeah, for me, the hassle, the frequency that they tip over, like, I'm not worried about them causing a lot of damage because they're not that big of a tree generally, but still, they just fall too much in my experience, in our neighborhood's experience, I should say. Palm trees, for the most part, there's a few that, and I don't know which ones they're called, but I saw some of those tip over in last summer's hurricane, which I can't remember the name of the storm. But that being said, most palm trees, awesome. I love them. They're pretty easy to maintain for the most part. Very rare to see them tip over. And I mean, it's the Florida vibe, man. They're gorgeous. And just, you know, that easy breezy lifestyle. So I'm all for the palm trees if I have the choice. And there's other trees too, but I mean, if you could pick any tree when you're living in Florida, like, one, why wouldn't you want a palm? That's probably one of the reasons you want to move here to begin with. And two, they're easier to take care of and they're less of a risk. So that's just my personal opinion and my experience from what I have seen. I'm not saying like that's the end all be all, because again, I'm a plant expert. That's just what I have seen. Also, one other thing to consider, and I'll make this quick so I can get to some of the other weird things, but like shrubs and things like that. Again, if you're a green thumb and you don't mind maintaining things and things like that, not probably going to be an issue for you. But if you don't want to be spending a lot of time with that kind of stuff, either A, living in a community that has, you know, grounds maintenance, which is a possibility, you know, for your home, like where they handle the lawn mowing and the bushes, which is a little less common. Lawn mowing is a little more common. You know, it's not a guarantee, but it's out there fairly frequently, especially in some of these newer communities. But that could be an option. Or again, if you don't mind maintaining it yourself, great. But if you don't want to do a lot of maintenance, either A, just don't have a lot of planting beds or buy a place with a lot of planting beds and a lot of bushes and shrubs. B, either pull them out when you move in, or C, put in some new ones that are a little more low maintenance, you know, and again, I don't know the names of them. So again, if you were like looking to move to the area and we could help you out, we can kind of like point out like, oh yeah, those are great. They don't grow too big, they don't grow too fast, because that's kind of the issue. Like either A, you're dealing with weeds kind of growing in that you got to pick out, and that's kind of a maintenance thing regardless, and or getting like nice stone beds in and things like that. So it's less common for the weeds to come in, but also another option would be, you know, putting in something that's less maintenance in general, just that doesn't grow too fast. Because just like the oak trees, like a lot of times certain bushes and shrubs and things like that that you could put in, they can grow really fast, really quick. And then that can be another thing that just takes a lot of time to maintain. Now, again, if you've got the time or you just like doing that, no big deal. But if you're a busy person or you just don't really care to do that or care that much about how that kind of stuff looks, then, you know, maybe just don't have anything around the house, or again, find some things that are a little less maintenance. Again, we could help you with that. I don't know what most of it is called, but like when I see it, I'm like, yep, we see those at our neighbors' houses, and those are great. They don't grow too fast. They're, you know, they're not too hard to take care of, and they don't die. That's the other thing too. You know, either something will grow too fast or it could die. So those are some things to be aware of. Okay, enough about vegetation. Here's another one. I'm gonna share some ones in a little bit that are more like that we've heard from the client side, but this is just like one, again, from my personal experience, one thing that I've noticed as being a pro or a con. So here's what it is. Being close to the gate and or entrance to a planned community. So for me, I don't want to drive 5-10 minutes just to get out of my planned community to get on the main road to where I'm going, because a lot of Florida is that way. Unless you're like in an older part of the city where there's, you know, more of that kind of like square grid of roads and there's multiple paths to get to where you're going. A lot of times there's going to be a main road you're going to have to get on. So like in Venice and Sarasota, like, well, Sarasota's got a little more options, but like Venice is like, a lot of it's like Tamiami, 776, maybe Jacaranda. Like there's not a lot of road options to get where you're going, you know, if you're going to travel for a ways. So you're going to have to get on that main road. And I don't like having to spend 5-10 minutes to get out of my community first to get to that main road. It just adds to your travel time, and it's just kind of an annoying slow drive to get through the neighborhood. I mean, maybe that's just me, maybe for you, again, it's not a big deal, but I think it's something to consider. So being closer to the gate, maybe not right next to the gate, because you don't want to deal with all the traffic coming in and out of your community, which honestly usually isn't going to be that much, you know, traffic. Like a lot of people are kind of worried, like, oh, there's going to be all these cars, and yeah, maybe a little bit more, you know, than if you're tucked further into the neighborhood, but it's not like you're going to be like on this main really busy road more often than not. So for me, that's one thing I would put into consideration. Like a community that really comes to mind for me is Rotunda. Rotunda is not a gated community, but there's not a lot of stuff in Rotunda as far as shopping and restaurants and things like that until you kind of get onto the main road. And so for a lot of the, and I could even say this actually for some of the bigger communities in Welland Park, like Island Walk and Grand Paradiso, like if you're far back in there, it's gonna take you a while for a lot of those to kind of get onto a main road and then get to where you're looking to go. So it's just like one of those little things that I think is worth putting into consideration. Again, just like the trees, I don't think it should be a make or break thing to help you decide if you are or aren't gonna buy a home, but maybe it could be a factor. Another thing worth considering is proximity, and this we've heard from multiple different clients. Proximity to like electrical lines and transformers. And again, this is going to be more on a community by community basis. You know, there's going to be certain ones that just you're going to be able to see them, and some people just don't want to see them. Some people don't mind seeing them, they just don't want to be too close to them. Other times, like South Venice is an example. Like they're not big transformers, but there are power lines everywhere, and a lot of people just don't like the look of it. Like me, I grew up in the country with my parents, you know, in a big yard, and there was power lines in the front, but like for us, it's like, you know, a lot of Wisconsin really, that's just kind of how it was. And so like we talked to people from other states where it's like, if you saw that, it made it seem like, oh, it's just not a nice looking neighborhood, or it maybe is a bad neighborhood. And so like a lot of older neighborhoods and neighborhoods in general in Florida that maybe aren't new planned communities, it's going to be a little more common to see that. And then outside of that, there are some new planned communities that just happen to get built near, like where there's big power transformers and things like that. So, you know, it's something to keep into consideration, and, you know, something that could be a factor. Again, it's going to be more of a house to house basis, but just one of those little quirky things that, you know, maybe you're not thinking of right now, but as you're going through a home search, might come on your radar, and one thing to put into consideration. And for some people, this will be a make or break thing. We've definitely had more than a few clients be like, yep, I don't like seeing that, or I don't like being that close to that. It's out. And that's fine. But just one thing to maybe consider. Again, I don't think it's like something like you should be thinking about first and foremost if you're just trying to begin the process of like looking at where you're looking to move. But as you get a little deeper into the actual home search, it's one of those things that will come onto your radar. And this next thing is similar to that. And again, I don't know if I would say it should be a make or break thing, because there's nuance with this, but retention ponds. Now, this is an interesting one because for me, I would much rather have a retention pond in a planned community. Maybe even not in a planned community for that matter, just for like, it's there to retain water. So like if a lot of rain comes, you know there's somewhere for it to go, and it's gonna help reduce your flood risk. One way you can reduce flood risk, I'll talk more about some other ways in a second, but having that retention pond can be really helpful for that. However, we have had clients who said, I don't wanna be by one of those retention ponds. I've got kids and I don't want them near any gators. And so here's the thing you gotta know about Florida. Just about any body of water, you should just about count on there being a gator in it. I'm not saying there for sure is, but there's a really good chance that there is. The other thing you should know, and again, I'm not gonna tell you how you should feel about it one way or the other, but just from my experience, generally you don't have a lot to worry about it. You have way more risk of dying in a car accident or getting injured in a car accident or a million other things than getting attacked by a gator. They tend to stick to the water. Occasionally they'll come right to the bank to sun themselves out. In very rare occurrences during mating season, you will see them walking around, but that is not very common. And if you think about it, most videos you see maybe of gators walking around, usually there's a body of water pretty nearby. And if there isn't, that's why the video was made viral and such a big deal, because it doesn't happen that frequently. I have never once seen a gator just walking somewhere. They're always by water every time I've seen them. We have had a neighbor see one walking across Tamiami Trail, like in the South Venice area, and took a video of it. So there is, one person we know that has seen it, but it's very, very, very rare. And again, them attacking you is rare. Like more often than not, like we have a gator that comes on the bank by our pond fairly frequently. Actually, I don't even know if it's the same gator anymore. I feel like there's been 3 or 4 that have kind of came and went since we moved to our community. The ones that we've always seen, like if you get close to them and make a loud sudden noise, they take off and they jump into the water. And they got a powerful tail, I'll tell you that much, because we've gotten sprayed by water once or twice, but from the tail flinging it. But a lot of times they're just as afraid of us as we are of them. Now, if you have small pets, you gotta be careful. Small kids, again, be careful. So I'm not here to to tell you oh, you don't worry about it whatsoever. No, you got to respect it and you got to be aware of it and all that. And if it's a risk that, even if it is small, you don't want to take, that's a-okay, but it's something to put into consideration. On that note, with flood risk, you don't necessarily need a retention pond. There are a lot of homes in Venice, in Northport, in Englewood, in Sarasota, where there's no retention ponds nearby. But what they'll do in a lot of these areas is your home will basically be on a little hill. And when I say hill, sometimes it'll look more like a hill than others. Sometimes it's so gradual you can barely tell it's there. But basically the game plan is if a lot of rain comes, it's going into the road, or maybe there's a ditch in between the road and the rest of your lot. So that's kind of the plan for that there. And again, another thing to put in consideration if you're looking to buy a home in Florida, having something to help prevent that flood risk. A couple other things to put in consideration. Number 1, just the location in general, as far as, is it close to other commercial stuff? What are the other neighbor communities nearby like? Oh my gosh, I don't know if you could see this. There's a spider web going from here all the way up to this tree here. Either that or it's a booby trap. I'm not gonna break it. That's crazy. I see so much cool stuff on these nature walks with you guys. Hit the like button if you appreciate all the cool stuff that we see on these walks. So anyways, having an awareness of what's nearby, again, those are things that as you get further in the home search, you're gonna kind of know and see. For some people, being close to commercial stuff might be kind of nice, but you don't want to be maybe just next door to it or right behind it, depending on what it is, or depending on the neighborhood. For example, I think a lot of people would find this somewhat appealing. Being on Venice Island or downtown Sarasota, near one of those downtowns and being in walking distance, for some people it'd be like, yes, put me right there. That would be awesome. But maybe being by a gas station, for a lot of people, no, I don't want to be by that. You know what I mean? So it just depends. And those are all some things to put into consideration. The neighborhood that are nearby. Here's one thing, a little nuance I think that should be put into consideration, because we've had this from clients, and I don't want to try to make you think one way or the other about it, but I just want to point out that it is a little different in Florida, and that's mobile home communities. A lot of times people coming from, at least I know the Midwest, I don't know the Northeast as much what their thoughts are on this, but I know from the Midwest, a lot of people think this way. You know, like a mobile home community, like, that might be a sketchy area or whatever the case may be. Look, in Florida, maybe not, really good chance not. Like a lot of times it's just like a cheap snowbird getaway, you know, place that a retiree can have. Or it's just, you know what, I'm retiring and I'm gonna live there full time and I just want something affordable and I don't want all these bills and yada, yada, yada. So it's not necessarily an indicator of the type of neighborhood being good or bad. Yes, they are lower priced or whatever the case may be, but like you're talking about living by a bunch of retirees that are just there to relax and enjoy life. And, you know, I don't think that's anything to necessarily be worried about. I know some people don't necessarily like the look of that, you know, type of neighborhood or whatever the case may be. And so that doesn't matter. Either way, they don't want to be by it. Hey, fine, fair enough. But I just wanted to point out that little bit of nuance just because it's just different down here. You know what I mean? So, and again, maybe being down here a while, you would change your perspective on that. Maybe even just thinking about moving to here and knowing what I've told you, you would change your perspective. Maybe not. Maybe being down here for years, you'd be like, yep, no, I still just don't like how those neighborhoods look. Fair enough. Just, you know, wanted to make sure that little bit of difference is pointed out. And then one other big thing, because this is something that's becoming more common that you should put into consideration. And again, this is one of those things that comes a little bit further down the home search route. You know, maybe you've kind of figured out, okay, I like Venice, I like Sarasota, or I like Englewood, I like Northport, whatever the case may be. And now you're starting to get to the home search process. And one thing that even when we first moved to the area, a lot of people were like, is gas coming down here for stoves? And we're just like, yeah, not so much. You know, there was a few communities in Welland Park that were starting to do it then, but now it's like a lot of the new communities in general in North Venice, there's a lot of communities picked from in Welland Park, resale for that matter, where there's the potential to have gas. So if you are someone that likes to play with fire, it is an option down in Florida, in this area of Florida at least now, and it wasn't so much in the past. So I think that's one thing to put into consideration, and just to know that it's an option. But again, typically with that, you're talking like newer construction homes in newer planned communities. So that brings with it a whole bunch of other things that I've talked about in other videos, such as HOAs, you know, being in a planned community, buying a newer or new construction home that, you know, and all those are things that you may or may not want, and you should definitely put into consideration. So if you want gas, just know that you're also probably signing up for a lot of those other things. So you have to decide if that's worth it for you or not, if you don't want to go that route. But I've noticed, and maybe this is just our experience, but most of the clients we've worked with that want gas are also looking for all those other things. So there you have it. I don't know, maybe you want gas, but you don't want all that stuff. Sorry, maybe we don't have a lot of options for that kind of thing if you're not looking to go HOA route, new construction, things like that. But as always, if you are looking to buy or sell a home from Sarasota down to the Port Charlotte, Englewood areas, or the entire Orlando metro, those are all areas we serve. Call or text us at 941-221-1897. As always, we got playlists in the description for the areas in Southwest Florida that we serve, with all kinds of videos about more information about moving to those areas. But yeah, we would love to help you avoid mistakes, get answers to those questions that are impossible to find online, and save you a lot of money when you're trying to move to the Sunshine State. If you're looking to buy or sell anywhere else in Florida, or the entire United States for that matter, you can click the link in the description, answer a few questions, and that'll get you connected with a local realtor in the area that you're looking to buy or sell, and that would do the same for you as we would. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button, and we'll see you in one of the playlists down below next. Live breezy.